welcome to the second Creative Innovations painting party. This is awesome. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for those who purchased the pattern packet and are ready to paint with me today. I am so excited to get started. Let's go. In this lesson, I want to show you how to do acrylic washes and then add inking over it. And I am using a pattern, Hydrangeas and Butterfly. It's originally a pen and ink pattern with oil rouging, but I'm turning it into a pen and ink with acrylic washes. You want to make sure when you have a surface, you're going to prepare it with 2 to 3 coats of Snow White, sand between coats, and make sure it's decent coverage of white. It's going to be like a premise of a watercolor. Trace on your basic line drawing. Try to do it as light as possible, and if you have any areas that you feel should be not double lined, take your eraser and erase the lines off. Once you put the washes on there, the lines won't come off. So you want to make sure you don't have more lines than you actually need, as well as you don't want them to be too dark and not covered, be able to cover them with the pen. So go over that. Once you're satisfied with that, I'm going to start blocking in washes of color. The first color I'm going to use is Foliage Green. I'm going to pick up my 12 flat, and with water in my brush, I have dirty water from previous greens, I'm going to mix it till it looks like melted ice cream. What you can do is then put your brush onto paper towel and get all the water out. Come over to your surface and brush on that color. If you go over the edge with your clean brush, wash it off quickly. Now I'm going to work on doing the stem, burnt umber. I'm going to use my regular 4-round, have some water, if you feel the pigment is too strong, you can add more water and wipe some of that down. There's a leaf in here, so we don't want to forget that one. Use my round to get up into that. So now, these look darker than the original first two I did, so I can go back over them with another coat of paint and make them darker. After the stem and leaves are dry, now we can go back and shade them. I'm going to use my number 12 flat, and I'm going to pick up more burnt umber, and I'm going to side load underneath the flower, walk it down a little bit, underneath the leaf, underneath this leaf and flower. And then where one branch comes over the other, we can separate that with a side load too. I'm going to actually do the main one down the left side on a diagonal. So I held my brush on a diagonal and brought it all the way down. I can do the same over here. You have to make sure your wash is completely dry though, otherwise you'll wipe off what you put on. And I'm going to do it along the bottom of this one. If you happen to go over the white, just with your clean brush, go back in and wipe it off. Bit over, so see how easy this is to clean up. Let's go back in with a clean brush. If you want to put a highlight in, take your Q-tip with a little bit of spit or water, and you can wipe off a little bit of that wash. And if it's very dry and you can't do that, no worries. Take some warm white, and I'm going to use a dry brush. Mine's a number 6 dome round, and I load the brush up, get the paint in all the hairs. Then I'm going to take a dry piece of paper towel, wipe most of it off, and then scratch the highlight down the center. Don't wash this out until you know you're done with it, because it doesn't work very well wet. Let's go to our leaves. The first shade on our leaves can be done with the straight foliage. So if we want to go against the flower, depending on how dark you made your wash, you should be able to see your float the first time. But if you don't worry about it. If you have a mop brush, mop that out. Now say for instance that didn't show up. Go darker. I'm going to go with Hauser dark green. And I'm going to go up on my brush to a 3/4 inch. And I'm going to come down to again, go over the edge, take your watered brush and water it right off. This one again, mop out those brush strokes. Once an area is dry, you can go back and deepen or bring some of that color up on the side where the shade would be. I wouldn't bring it all the way up to the peak, but make sure your color is dry. And clean up over the edge. We're also going to do the center veins. I'm going to do the top above the line and twist so the water meets the tip. Like here, I'm going to do the water is going to twist and meet the tip. Opposite on this side. Water up, twist and meet the tip. I'm waiting for this one to dry to go back and finish it. You can also start with the water in the tip and then work your way flat to the shade. I'm also going to put some on the bottom with the water in the tip and work my way along the bottom of that leaf. My way along the bottom of the leaf. The water of the brush is in the tip. This one here, water of the brush in the tip. If you need to reshape it, you go back with your clean brush and you can reshape that. I'm going to size down to my 12. And I'm going to finish, I'm going to do these other ones now. Start in the center, and water ends in the peak. I'll make this a little darker down here. This has a petal going over it. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of shading there. It's a little darker. And this one is, the tip of it's underneath the other flower. So I'm going to go ahead and put some shading in there as well. And then with the little piece that comes up inside between the petals, I'm going to take a little bit of water and some of that color and wash that up in there and then tap it down. So that it kind of blends. We Remember, if you get any over the flowers, go ahead and wipe them out real quick. Because you're using a lot of water, it should be able to clean off relatively easy. While I have the brown out, I'm going to do the body of the butterfly. Remember, water and paint. I'll let that dry. Always go back when you're done a couple steps and reassess and see where you need to go darker or lighter. You want to just add a little bit more shadow to some areas. Make sure they're dry. I like these. There's a little area back here that probably should have some shading. A little too much pigment. Let's get some more water. You want to be as uniform as possible. This area here can be a little darker. I'm going to blow dry that, make that area a little darker. Let's now shade the bottom of him. Flatten your number 4 out and just put it on the corner of your brush. And you can do the bottom of his head and his body. Now let's start to work on our blossoms. I'm going to take out some Payne's Gray, and with my round brush I'm going to go into the negative space, not where the full petal is, but between the full petals. And this will have some water but not a lot of water, so between the petals there's this negative area. And it doesn't have to be all the same. It can be splotchy. That gives it more depth. And go fill in all that area. Any area that appears too big, too much Payne's gray, go ahead and create your own leaves. Think about how they would form behind each other. I'm going to bring this one up over here. So I'm going to let that dry. So I'm going to start with Blue Harbor and switch over to Plum at some point so that each blossom, individual petals have different colors. These are all going to be side-loaded, and they're not going to be side-loaded in the center, they're going to be side-loaded around the outer edge. I want to keep the white in the center. So bring it down about 1/3. Use your mop. And I'm going to pick and choose. If this one's behind that one, I'll put the color behind it. Okay, this one is going to be the same color. Make sure you have a fair amount of water. You can always go back and add more. If they're too close to each other, make that one the plum color, and then it won't go into the next. So I'm going to just continue going around, picking and choosing which ones to make blue, and adding the other one. The other color would be plum, and you do the same thing. Pick and choose. Like we said, this one was too close to the blue, so we're going to come in and add the plum. As you see, I've finished most of them. I've got 2 petals up here and a fold over that I want to show you. This side here is basically each petal is a solid, whatever color you choose. I did go over some of the plum with some of the Blue Harbor. And over here, I want to show you how you can have a petal be both colors. You can have some Blue Harbor, you can have some plum. So you could use both colors on some of the petals to give it some variation. I'm going to do the petal, and I'm going to show you how to do this roll over of this particular piece down here. That is going to be with the Blue Harbor, side loaded. Pick up a little bit. You want to make sure you have enough workout water in there so that it's soft to begin with. And I'm going to put this against the outside edge. So water, if you want to start with a tip, it's going against that outside edge, leaving white. And I say outside edge because this part's coming forward, rolling forward, leaving white on this edge and having the blue against that edge. These two, I'll mix and show you how I did both colors on one petal. So I'll start with a little bit of Blue Harbor. And it with the paintbrush against the line. You don't want to stop abruptly. I'll do the same on this one. If when you start to touch down you have too much paint on your brush, just go back and pick up more water or work it out more on your palette. But I'm twisting it around so that my brush hairs are parallel with my graphite line when I end. Let's dry that and let's go into the plum. Pick up where against the line, pick up where you left off, bring it down, bring it over, mop it out. Do the same on this side, where you ended. Be careful that you don't wipe off what you put on over there. If it's hard to get into, go right over the other ones and then take your Q-tip and wipe off the area you don't want it on. So do that throughout until you have all the blossoms covered. Always evaluate, like I said before, if you need darker, lighter, do what you need to do. Now I want to set some of these back where there's two plums next to each other, or if I feel like I have a space here that I could have used that background Payne's gray color, I will go in, pick up some of that Payne's gray and say, okay, right here I want some Payne's gray. And just put that in. So if any spaces you feel that you could stand to have some Payne's gray to break up that area, go ahead and put that in. The other thing I'm going to use the Payne's gray for is to deepen some of the back petals. So these white areas are kind of white to be behind the other petals. So on some of them I can pick up a side load of Payne's gray and shadow them. Put them behind, go right over whatever color you made them. To put them in the background. If this is overlapping, you can always add it to that one. So wherever a petal is overlapping another blossom, I'm not necessarily putting them where a petal overlaps a petal, but definitely where a petal overlaps or a blossom overlaps the petal. You can also use this Payne's gray to deepen your green. And see how strong that Payne's gray is? Maybe I don't really like it that strong. Wash your brush out and then soften it with the water. And then a mop. If you're in this tight area, you can always take your round brush and some of that watered down Payne's gray and just wash over the whole thing. So now that's putting some of those petals further back into the background and giving your hydrangea a little bit more depth. And this is pretty, but now it's setting back. It's giving it, adding that extra depth to it. You can even go back and add some of the Payne's Gray side load to an outside edge. And that means it's like turning away from the light. And it doesn't have to follow all of the Blue Harbor. It can just be in the bumps. It can be just on one side. Nice thing about it is you get to choose. If they got too liney, go back in with a wider side load and fill in some area. And if you're going to do Payne's Gray on one of the leaves, you should do Payne's Gray on all the leaves. So we did that one here, we did this one in here. And it might just be in the deepest V's where the letter V, whenever there's a triangle. Now I'm going to put in the centers with the foliage, and you can use a stylus, you can use the end of your liner brush, put in, and just pick a few blossoms. They don't all have to have the same number of center. And some can be inside. I'm going to work on the butterfly. That's going to be done with plum against the body. Fairly wide side load around the head, bring it up to the wing, and then bring it down to the other side. Remove any makeup lines that you don't like. Knock that out. Dry that. Against the outer edge, I'm going to put a float of Blue Harbor. And I'm going to use my 12 this time. I'll dry that. What I need to do now is put on the detail lines. And now I know where to put the next float. And that's on this inside. I also need to put little floats on the inside of these dots. So the first one is going to be Blue Harbor. I think I made those plum. Yes, I'm tipping the brush when I tell you don't tip the brush. I am going to blow dry that and then add some Payne's Gray to the plum and do a little shading against the body. And to separate the wings a little bit. Okay, now that we have the dots in, let's put on the highlights. I'm going to dry brush some highlights using my dome round and some Snow White. Pick up the white on your brush, work it into your brush hairs, and on a dry piece of paper towel, wipe most of it off. And then come over and do circles to scratch some of that white back into your leaves. Stay out of the dark. So it goes against the opposite side of the center vein that you've shaded and the outer edge. Now make sure you've erased those graphite lines, and we need to now give it some grounding, if you will. Make it look like it belongs on the background, blooming, and not be popping off like a decal. So I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to make sure everything's dry, wet the area, and pick a color. Pick the darker green, the Hauser dark, and you can go in and just add some washes of this color against the flowers. You want to not necessarily have it on your leaves, so you want to make sure that you can get it off your leaf. Use a Q-tip, because as long as the leaf is wet, it will travel over there. Let's put some under here. If you want, you can pick up some Payne's Gray, very watery. Pre-wet this area. This area in here we can pre-wet and then use your liner brush and go in with some of that darker green. So see how it's starting to calm down and be softer transition between the design and your background. So you can use all of the colors on your palette. And I'm going to put a little bit of Payne's Gray around our butterfly. Now if you would like, you can wash the whole background with these colors. Pre-wet the area. Pick one of the colors, make sure it's very diluted, and you can kind of splish splash color and mop it out to soften. When it's dry, add the next color. Make sure your colors that are on there are dry, and it will look like it's in a garden full of other hydrangeas with all the colors softened around it. Okay, now I'm going to completely dry it, seal it with an acrylic spray, and then we will do the inking. I dried my piece overnight and I began to ink it. There are several pens that you can ink with. Some of them are correctable, some of them are not. So I want to go over the options that you have with inking and how to fill in large spaces without having to be there for 10 hours doing it, making a career out of it. So first off, I want to acknowledge that we have an Identa pen and a Sharpie marker. These have dual tips, fine and ultrafine, and both can work. However, I found them not to be as easily correctable. So if you make a mistake with them, and pretty much the permanent marker means just that, they're permanent. The next marker I tried was a micron, and it is correctable with an ammonia-based product like Windex. Another one that is also correctable is the Faber-Castell Pitt pens, and they come sometimes in a package, and you can buy a whole pack with 4 different sizes, so you can use whatever size you need, as well as does the micron. And this is also correctable with a Q-tip full of an ammonia-based product. The one that I tend to use most frequently is a Rapidograph by Kohinoor, because it is refillable. Therefore, when these dry out, you have to replace them. If the pen gets gooped up with sealer, then it's dead and you have to replace it. The Rapidograph is refillable and correctable. If you make a mistake, take your Q-tip, cotton swab, dip it in some Windex, and then take it right off. So you'll never have to buy another pen if you use your Kohinoor. If you're not sure if you're going to like the inking, what you can do is always take a piece of acetate and place it on top. That's like the clear plastic that you used to use on the overhead projectors when you were in school. You can put that on top. You can ink your lines and decide if you're going to like it or not. So I'm going to show you how to add some detail to your surface with inking. I'm going to start and give him some antenna. Outline his head. I'm going to outline his body. On the bottom part, to give him a little bit more depth, I'm going to put these little dash lines in the shaded areas. I'm also going to use this pen to outline his wings. And you want to use a very light touch, almost like as if you're just tickling the surface. You don't want to really be scratching the surface to the point where you're digging up any of the spray into your pen. Now all this area around these dots is all filled in with black. The ink that I'm using on this pen is a Daler-Rowney FW Acrylic Artist ink, and this is black. So what I can do to fill in the rest of this with ease is take my bottle cap, fill it with some ink, take my liner brush, get the water out, pick up some of that ink, and then go in and just paint around that area. Now you could do this with black paint too if you want, but this will give it all the same sheen. So I'm not going to bore you to death on doing that. So now that I did all the inking in the butterfly with the brush, and did little hash marks up over my shading, I repeated that down here on the stem with a little hash marks along the shading. A leaf is done by outlining I did the vein, and then I did the offshoots, starting, always start from the center, work your way out, start from the center, work your way out. A blossom, you can outline the blossom, each petal individually. Make sure that the petals, the outlines touch and not just dangle. When you're done outlining them, pull some lines up from the center of each petal, even if it's not a full blossom, whatever petals you can see. And I outlined the circles in the middle. This is acrylic ink, so it will dry relatively quickly. But if you think that you're going to smear it, always you can have a paper towel underneath your hand. And I like holding my pen at a 90-degree angle.
Once again, thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next here on Creative Innovations in Painting.
Until next time, remember to always paint with heart.